Welcome to the Living a Nordic Life podcast, where we explore a simpler, cosier and more intentional life the Nordic way. I'm Fiona McKenna, your Nordic living guide and founder of Living a Nordic Life, where I share all things Nordic living and show you that a Nordic life is the way to bring intentional calm and healthy habits into your own life, wherever you are in the world. Are you looking for ways to bring simplicity, coziness and calm into your life? Well, let me show you how. Visit the Living a Nordic Life website to explore how I can help you on your journey to simple, healthy and happy calm, the Nordic way. You can subscribe to the podcast right here. And if you want regular inspirational emails sent with love from Norway and straight to your inbox, don't forget to subscribe to the Living a Nordic Life newsletters. And so now let's dive into our episode. Hello and welcome to this episode, the Nordic appreciation of craftsmanship. And this is probably going to be one of my shorter episodes, but it's covering a topic that I think is so important, craftsmanship and the skills that we have. And it's something that's considered very important here in the Nordics, but it's not necessarily valued everywhere else. You might come from an area where it is, which is absolutely wonderful. But I want to talk to you about it because I think it's a really important part of the culture here. Not that long ago, I was watching a programme on Norwegian TV called Nordisk Håndarbeid, Nordic Crafts. And it's presented by an Icelandic lady who's a textile artist of fabric crafts particularly. She creates these really beautiful works of art from fabric, wool and other materials, kind of soft things, that she's travelled all over Scandinavia to get and meet other artisans and craftsmen and women to learn about their way of working. And they turned it into this wonderful programme. So she was meeting people from Norway and her home in Iceland, Finland, Sweden. I don't think she went to Denmark, I can't really remember. But there were a lot of really old skills, things like dyeing wool and yarn from vegetables and unusual plants that they'd collected, actually some that I had never seen before but grow native here. And the crafts themselves were stunning. There were some new techniques, of course, but most of them were these really ancient techniques that were kept alive by people who literally dedicated their entire lives to immersing themselves in it. And it made me think about it at this time of year because we're coming up towards autumn and Christmas as well, and we start to see a lot of craft markets. And there are a lot of craft markets selling handmade things here, and they're not cheap. But these people have these incredible skills. And it made me think about this programme and the profound and lasting memory that I had of it. And that was wherever these people are working in Scandinavia, there's a deep appreciation of their work and skills. And they're able to make a good living from it. The lady who presented this programme, Tina, she compared this to artisan friends doing the same thing in other parts of Europe and other parts of the world, and they resoundingly said that they could only do it as a hobby if they weren't here in the Nordics, and that they had to get another job to sustain it. So it was something they could only do as a side gig, in the evenings or at the weekends. They couldn't really dedicate their time to it. And, they may be doing it when they were a little bit tired as well, so it made it hard. And this made me think about the Nordic attitude towards manual crafts and skills and the respect that is shown to people who've worked hard and long to hone their art and skill. Many of these ancient crafts in Scandinavia date back as far as the Vikings and beyond. It goes without saying that the Vikings were great carpenters. We know that, don't we? Because they built some incredible ships. And those ships could withstand months at sea in some of the most treacherous and stormy conditions. Conditions that you wouldn't want to be in a metal-hulled ship, a huge ship, that could withstand waves and all these storms. You'd probably feel a bit travel sick even then. But can you imagine being in an open wooden boat? I mean, it doesn't even bear thinking about, does it? But those boats actually managed to get there. They got them there. But they weren't just carpenters, and, we consider them as raiders, don't we, sometimes, the Vikings? But they weren't. They had this deep love and appreciation of the finer arts. They really loved metalwork and weaving themselves, wood carving and painting. But they also loved to see other cultures' art, other cultures' skills. And just a few minutes in the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo will confirm that the Vikings themselves had skills beyond raiding and beyond just sailing and going from one place to the next. The beautiful pieces of craftsmanship that are on display there, that they treasured, show that. Some of them were traded in far off lands, a long way, actually, to be perfectly honest, and things that they would never have been able to make themselves, made with materials that they didn't have in Scandinavia. And some of them were things that were made at home. Many were familiar skills that we can easily recognise and are still practised now. They've been passed down that far, over 1,000 years, these things. But in my own working life, I've been at the receiving end of comments and attitude that have not always been complimentary from people who believe that everyone has to have, or everyone who's worth something has to have a university degree and specialise in banking, technology or the tertiary sector in order to earn any kind of respect. But since moving to Norway, I've realised that the skills that I have and the skills of those around me as well, who work with their hands, have such a huge and lasting benefit to society. These are the people who keep the ancient cultural arts alive. These are the people who link us to our historical past through means of art, crafts, and the clothes we wear. Especially if you're wearing wool and you're wearing an old style Nordic pattern. You know, these things haven't just sprung up out of nowhere. But it's also the food we eat. And it's all a part of living history, if you will. And as I realised this, I also noticed how many people are able to charge for quality workmanship in Scandinavia. There are so many craft fairs and things at this time of year, like I said, and the prices are reasonable for the amount of hours that goes into that. Think about how long it takes to make a sweater, for example. That's not an evening's work. And even if it was, you know, you're entitled to a good wage per hour, aren't you? But it's not an evening's work. It's many evenings' work. It's hours of work. And not only that, but it's the skill and the expertise and the experience that goes into that. That's just an example. But the true value of a piece of handmade knitwear or handcrafted felt, or a beautifully made candle or some silverware, is reflected in the price here, and Scandinavians are more than willing to pay for it. There are so many hours of work and specialised talents to make these things. And it may mean that the hand-knitted mittens or the embroidered tablecloth have to last for many, many years, but it should be something that's cherished and passed on. And if the artisan themselves or the artisans themselves are well paid for their work, then they're able to pass their skill on to the next generation by way of apprentices. They have the money, they have the time and they have the resources to be able to teach that skill to the next generation. And that skill is kept alive and the wheel keeps turning. I think you see this most obviously here in bunad making, the Norwegian national dress. It's become something of an industry in itself, and it takes a great deal of training and work to get it right, and every region, every town has its own different style of bunad. It might be a slightly different colour, different woven ribbon for the waist or belt, different type of embroidery on the dress, a different type of lace that is used to embellish the collars and the cuffs of the bunad blouses. And then there's the silverware that goes with it. So little tiny filigree silver pieces of jewellery like earrings and brooches and belt buckles and shoe buckles and all of these things. The bunad knives that you would hang, the little bags, hats, everything has to have somebody making it who has an awful lot of skill. And it's being passed on to the next generation. It's being actively encouraged. And the price reflects that, of course. So, as we're coming up towards a time when you might be starting to think about Christmas, or maybe you're just thinking about birthdays, or perhaps you just want to bring a new family heirloom into your life, I urge you, where possible, to consider each item that you're buying and try to support these often quiet but cleverly skilled people who might be making the perfect gift just around the corner from you. It doesn't have to be a Nordic themed thing, it could be from where you are. Of course, you want to support local people, don't you? That helps your local economy. The artisans at the Christmas markets and the craft markets that are so popular at this time of year, and take a moment to think about the hours and the love that they've put into every single stitch or twist of metal, each knit, and every stir of the pot to bring a fine quality item to you. Something that can be loved and appreciated and passed on. Think about it like that. Think about it as an investment for future generations. You're keeping those skills alive. So get out there and support your local artisans, please, and appreciate these wonderful crafts that are still alive. And if we keep supporting them, they will continue to be alive. And I'll see you in the next episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Living a Nordic Life newsletters so you can get an email when I release a new episode. It's a quick and easy way to keep up with all things Nordic living. Please visit livinganordiclife.com. You can listen to Living a Nordic Life on lots of podcast apps, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, and plenty of others. If you've enjoyed the Living a Nordic Life podcast, why not leave me a rating? So that's the end of Living a Nordic Life for today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.